Good morning, everyone. I had to wait till I got turned on. It's cold. It took a moment. So welcome everyone to the Triangle Center for Spiritual Living. I know that we have some first-time guests with us today, so I would just like to take a moment, and we're not even going to make you stand, but we're just going to acknowledge your presence and to just say that we're very, very grateful for you to be joining us today. For those of you that I haven't had a chance to actually meet or have a conversation with, my name is Reverend Dusty Ripplemeyer. I am the senior minister of this amazingly beautiful, wonderful community. We are part of a larger organization called Centers for Spiritual Living, and we believe in one God, a God that is within us and surrounding us, a God that is benevolent and loving and always available. And we believe that God is not only a presence within us, but it is also a creative power. In the beginning was the Word, and God created everything that we see and everything that we cannot see. And because we were created by and out of God, we have that same ability. So we have the ability to create the experiences of our lives. And we do so whether we're aware of it or not, consciously or unconsciously. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit about all of that today. So we believe that we can change our lives by changing our mind. And we're here to support each other on this spiritual path and to love each other and be in community with each other. And we do that quite often. Sundays for classes, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesday night we have service, we have game nights. Last night we played bingo. So there's always something to do and somewhere to be. You don't ever have to be alone when you're part of this family. So I also welcome all of those that are at home, that have welcomed us into their homes through the technology of live streaming. Thank you very much for including us in your morning.
The reading for today is from Ernest Holmes. He says, "The life within you is God. Whatever is true of God is true of your life. Since your life and the life of God are not two, but one. The enlightened have proclaimed this unity of good, this oneness of man with God. For this reason, many have spoken of this life within you as both personal and impersonal. Impersonal from the standpoint that it is universal. Personal from the standpoint that this universal life principle is personified in you."
Hi. A few people have just joined us. Was it the time change or the rain or welcome, so glad that you're here. If you missed it, the theme for the month of April is You Are Rooted in the Divine, and my talk title is Your Impersonal Self. Now last week Reverend Andy beautifully took us into our inner depths, to the energy that we are made of, to those unique subatomic particles of atoms, molecules, compounds, cells, organs, and systems that interrelate with each other in our own unique way. He then took us out and beyond that to the universe, and even beyond that, stating that we are part of a web of life, an integral part of the mosaic of life. And he said that everything is an entire universe of being, really countless forms of energy in relationship to each other, and that we are one of those countless forms of energy. He said that we see life at the level of the hierarchy at life at which we exist. Who we are and how we identify ourselves is our personal self. And that is entirely dependent upon our relationships with each other. I remember he made it very clear, I am not a minister without all of you here. So this morning we're going to take this idea a little bit deeper. This personal self that Andy spoke about, our memories, our image of our own body, our fears, our experiences, our hopes, and our dreams are part of our human selves, and they are constantly changing. So if they're constantly changing, they can't really be the truth about us, because the truth is always the truth and it never changes. As was said before, the theme of the month is you are rooted in the divine, which means that every human being is a glorious intersection of the finite and the infinite. That we have within us a spark of the divine that is a constant that will never change. It is ever present. The only thing that could ever deny that truth is ourselves. Our personal self is, as Ernest Holmes said in the reading that Petra read, personal from the standpoint that this universal God principle is personified in us. This universal God principle is personified in us. Now, so today we're going to take a moment to really look at this personal self, the personal self with a capital P and a capital S. The life within us is God's life. That life, the life of God's, did not begin and it will not end. We are immortal and eternal. Evolution, or who we are becoming, is the outdrawing of that God principle that is already within us. So through our spiritual evolution, we are forever becoming more and more and more of our highest and truest personal selves. Since our personal self is that universal God principle personified within us, how we express that life is our personal self. The mind within us is God's mind. God's mind is the presence of wisdom and knowledge. And through our deep and abiding connection to the mind of God, we are tapped into all wisdom and all knowledge that there has ever been throughout all of time, both in the past and in the future. God's mind is the mind that created everything that there is, seen and unseen. And through our deep and abiding connection to the mind of God, we are tapped into the creative power of God. Its power to create is our power to co-create with that mind. Since our personal self is that universal God principle personified within us, how we express that mind, that wisdom, that knowledge, and that creativity is our personal self. The love within us is God's love. God and love are synonymous. And since we were created by God, then we are the very presence of love itself. It can only be true that if God is love and we are one with God, then our innermost nature has to be love. It is what we are and who we have come here to be. It is the realization of the I am presence, the aligning of ourselves with it, and the realization that this present does not only live within me, but that it lives within everyone. Everything and everyone. There is not a spot where God is not. Love isn't perceived with the human senses, but love is perceived through our higher self, through the intuitive knowledge of our hearts. Since our personal self is that universal God principle personified within us, then how we express that love is our personal self. The peace within us is God's peace. It would be when I click that again. Now, peace doesn't mean to be a place where there is no noise or no trouble or no hard work. It means to be within the midst of those things and still feel calm within our hearts. It means to be and to bring the presence of peace to every situation, to every relationship, to every circumstance, in every arena of our lives. Since our personal self is that universal God presence principle that is personified within us, how we express that peace is our personal self. The abundance within us is God's abundance. The law of life is abundance. God is an infinite, inexhaustible, endless supply. Because God's resources are infinite, our resources are infinite. We demonstrate that abundance in our lives by really understanding and embodying this fundamental truth. Supply, it might seem, at some times in our lives, maybe some more than others, but at some times in our lives, like it comes from us, or comes to us from outer channels, from outer sources. But our ability to experience it, to really experience abundance in our life, depends upon us powerfully stepping into a consciousness of abundance. It's the only way that abundance will ever really show up in our lives. Now, since our personal self is that universal God principle personified within us, how we express that abundance is our personal self. The joy within us is God's joy. Excuse me. Joy, very different from happiness, is an inner state of being. It requires absolutely nothing outside of ourselves to be in joy, to experience joy in our lives. It is who we are. It is a choice that we can make no matter whatever circumstances that we happen to be finding ourselves within. To really be able to experience joy in our life, we have to align ourselves with the presence of joy that is at our very core. And when we do that, we are able to bring joy into every single one of our relationships. We are able to add to that relationship through that joy. Since our personal self is that universal God principle personified within us, how we express that joy is our personal self. We have a friend, a presence that is within us. It is that spark of the divine within. It is our unique, individualized expression of the living Spirit. It is our inner, absolute, and perfect personal self. To our human mind, it might seem like we are separate from it, but that has never been, nor will it ever be, the truth. There can be no greater unity than that between each of us and the presence of God within us. Ernest Holmes said, "Your personality is an outpicturing of the impressions which you have received from this inner friend. You are an incarnation of this person, this presence, and this power." So the invitation today is to really identify ourselves, our real personal selves, through our relationship to God itself. If we're going to be relating to others to identify ourselves, then the best place to relate ourselves to is the presence of God within us. To know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is absolutely the truth of who we are. That universal God principle has become personalized in us. That it is within each and every single one of us, that we can never be separated from us, and that is always ready, willing, and able to express through and as us. Ernest Holmes says, "I am within you is the only presence there is. I create innumerable centers of my consciousness personified as people, yet I am is the thread of unity running through all, binding all back to myself. Because I am a perfect oneness, all of me exists everywhere. Wherever you recognize me, there I am. And whether or not you recognize me, I am still there. The divine visitor, which is your true self, and which is that which I am, is both the one which stands at the door and knocks, and the one who answers the door." This is our personal self with a capital P and a capital S. I also want this morning to remind you that Ernest Holmes said earlier that our consciousness of God is both personal and impersonal. That it is personal in that it is personified through us, which I just spoke about, and it's impersonal in that we are all using a universal power. Now, the underlying truth is that when we align ourselves to the truth of who we are, or to the truth of life rather than to the facts of life, that we consciously avail ourselves to universal laws which create greater joy, more ease, more power, and unimaginable freedom to be made manifest in our lives. And on the flip side, when we resist the truth of life, when we resist the nature of life, we unconsciously create an experience of suffering. The invitation is for each of us to really be able to understand the impersonal nature of the universe, of God, and to assume the responsibility that we have to ourselves and to humanity, really to humanity, to use it rightly. The law within us is God's law. So that law that is within each of us is both universal and individual. Since our minds are all a part of the mind of God, then there's this place within us that uses this universal law. That universal law that is within us is neutral and impersonal. It's an aspect of God. It's a mechanical force that we can use for definite purposes. We can use to manifest something specific that we want or want to experience. It's a mechanical force that always works the same way for everybody, all of the time, with absolutely no exceptions. The law that is within each of us is a movement of intelligence within and upon itself, and that intelligence already exists within us. The law within each of us is a creative medium by which our word is made manifest. It is a creative medium that always says yes to whatever we think, feel, or believe into it. We use this same law, the same creative medium that brought the planets into being. We use the same law, that same creative medium that created everything that there is. The bottom line is to think, is to create. Ernest Holmes said, "This is the key which opens the doorway to wisdom and to power. that doorway is already within you. The power within us is God's power. The power within each of us is the power of our word operated upon by law. Now, what is true is that we have already been using this law, using this power throughout all of our lives. We have already been thinking and feeling and believing and creating in every moment, in every arena of our lives since the day we arrived on the planet. We have authority over this law. We have authority over this power, and we have already been, whether we know it or not, exercising our authority time and time again. The issue, however, is that we have been using this law, we've been exercising this authority over this power, not always very consciously. More often than not, unconsciously, kind of by default. We aren't always conscious of our words. We're not always conscious of our thought patterns. We're not always conscious of our underlying beliefs. We're not always conscious of those ideas that we buy into from race consciousness. And so we create not always so consciously, but unconsciously. The thing about our unconscious use of this power is that it doesn't really matter to the law. It's impersonal. It doesn't care. It has absolutely no judgment about what you want to create or why. It simply does our bidding. It simply says, yes, your wish is my command. Ernest Holmes says, no greater good can come to you than to know that the power already within you is the power to live, the power to create. Not only to create for yourself, but for others. The power to do good, the power to heal, and the power to prosper. So the invitation this morning is to really know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is a presence, that there is a law, that there is a power, and that this presence, this law, and this power is within us. That it is both universal and individual, that it is both our personal self and our impersonal self. The invitation this morning is to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the mind of God created everything that there is, and because we are one, our mind is one with the mind of God, that we already have the ability to project new ideas or new thoughts, or to really create new inventions, new ways of doing things. That our thoughts, our feelings, and our beliefs are the creative cause back of everything that transpires in our lives. It's a really good news. Now, the invitation today is to do the inner work, to become aware of our thought patterns, of our conscious and unconscious beliefs, of the ways that we have already been using this law and this power. To recognize and accept our responsibility for creating the experiences of our lives, and to do so with compassion, knowing that if we would have known better, we would have done better. And that the person that created the experience in the first place is the one that can recreate it or can change it. The invitation today is to see beyond our human perceptions and all of the ways that we have been relating to ourselves or to each other or to the circumstances of our lives. To be vigilant in noticing the creep of the fear, the doubt, the worry, and the despair, and to turn away from that fog of confusion. to repeatedly turn our attention and intention to the spiritual side of life, and to consciously use this law, this power, to create abundance rather than limitation, to create freedom rather than bondage, to create faith rather than fear, and to create wholeness rather than dis-ease. The invitation this morning is to really begin to relate to ourselves as powerful, because we are. To relate to ourselves as powerful, as unique and divine expressions of God, imbued with the presence of God itself. What could be more powerful than that? To really use the spiritual practices of centering, meditation, contemplation, affirmation, visioning, and prayer, to gain access to this power and presence, and then to use it consciously in our everyday lives. And lastly, the invitation is for each of us to find our tribe, to lean into them, to ask for support, to ask for prayer. This community, the Triangle Center for Spiritual Living, is the right and perfect space and place for that to occur, because we know and we affirm that truth for and about each of us, individually and collectively, all of the time. That truth is alive here. Please repeat after, or please speak along with me this affirmation. I am a perfect point in the universe. Within me is the life, the mind, the love, the peace, the abundance, and the joy of God itself. Within me is the law and the power of God. I am infused with all I should need and want to create a life of power, purpose, and contribution. As I say yes to the universal presence that is within me, I avail myself to greater good, to a deeper sense of peace, to a more profound love, to unbounded joy, and to an unimaginable freedom. All is well, and so it is, and so it is. Please turn within. With my eyes closed and my attention turned inward, I am acutely aware of that power and presence of God that is within me and surrounding me. I know it to be that which is at the center of my being. It is the presence of peace, joy, creativity, wisdom, freedom, unconditional love. And I know that I am one with it, that it created me in its image and likeness, that right where I am, God is in its fullness, in its wholeness. And just as I know that that is true for me, I know that it is true for each and every person here today. Each of us is a unique expression of God, God's ambassador on the planet, here to express all of those God qualities that are within us out into the world, to heal it, to soothe it, to have it laugh, to have it work. And it is from that place of unity that I speak these words about and for each of us today, truly knowing that we are spiritual beings having a human incarnation, that we arrived on the planet imbued with everything that we need. Absolutely no power in worry, doubt, fear, confusion that could be any more than the power and presence of God. I claim for each of us that anything unlike that power and presence falls to the wayside as we continue to turn toward that presence, as we continue to align ourselves with it. That as we do so, we powerfully bring its presence into our life in a way that cannot be denied. That we bring it forth for ourselves in creating a life that we love to live, and we bring it forth for everyone else, creating a world that works for everyone. I claim ease and grace around doing this for each of us. That it is the truth, that it will never change, that everything else about us changes and fluctuates. Why not, instead of relating to the things around us, relate to the thing that never changes? Relate to God. I'm so grateful to know this truth and to speak these words. So grateful for the power of prayer, knowing that these words are loosed into a law that only ever says yes, that they are clothed in form even as they are spoken, and so I speak them and I release them with love and gratitude and full expectation of their manifestation, letting go and letting God be God. And I invite each of us to anchor this prayer for ourselves and for each other simply by saying, "And so it is." Amen. Amen.